I still remember the first morning after I moved in with Paige and her husband, Tyler. The house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. The curtains were drawn just so, and everything had a place. Too neat, too arranged like a showroom rather than a home. I told myself it was just adjustment. After all, they had welcomed me in when the loneliness of my old house became too heavy, when the silence of those empty rooms seemed to swallow me whole. Before we continue with the rest of the story, please comment where you're listening to this from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. At first, I tried to be grateful. I brewed the morning coffee, folded laundry, wiped counters without being asked. Little things to show appreciation. Paige would glance at me with a tight smile, and Tyler muttered thanks, though his eyes rarely lifted from his phone. It felt transactional, as if I had traded one kind of loneliness for another this time. Surrounded by people but still unseen. The first few weeks slipped by quietly, almost deceptively peaceful. But in the stillness, I began to notice details. How Paige's tone sharpened when she asked me to do something. "Can you fold those towels, Mom?" Not a request, but a command wrapped in politeness. How my chair at the dinner table was always the one nearest the kitchen, like I was positioned to serve. How they rarely asked about my day, as if my life outside of their walls no longer existed. I told myself not to dwell on it. Families adjust, roles shift, but inside, a voice whispered that something was off. That love, when genuine, never feels like obligation. One evening, I stood by the kitchen sink, my hands deep in suds, washing plates, while Paige scrolled through her tablet on the couch. Tyler laughed at something on television. My back ached, my fingers were raw, and I thought, when did I stop being a guest and start being the help? The house itself seemed to echo my unease. Its spotless surfaces, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock in the hallway, all sounded louder than they should, pressing down on me. Even the air felt heavier, as though I was trespassing in a life that wasn't mine. And yet, I swallowed my discomfort. I reminded myself that they had taken me in, that it was better than the creaking silence of my old place. But deep down, the truth gnawed. This wasn't kindness anymore. It was control, disguised as care. I remember one small moment that lingered with me. I had stepped out to the porch early one morning, wrapped in my cardigan, to watch the sun rise. The sky was painted in strokes of orange and pink, a fleeting beauty I had always loved. But behind me, Paige's voice cut through the quiet. "Mom, don't sit out there too long. You'll catch a chill. Come back inside." Her words weren't cruel, but they carried weight, the weight of someone who believed my choices were no longer mine to make. And in that instant, the sunrise lost its glow. I felt like a child again, monitored, directed, diminished. It was then, standing on that porch with the sky burning above me, that the seed of doubt took root. This house wasn't a refuge. It was a gilded cage, and though I didn't know it yet, that seed would one day grow into the decision that changed everything. It began with little things so small. At first, I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. One afternoon, I had finished sweeping the living room. The floor gleamed, sunlight bouncing off the wood in bright stripes. I set the broom against the wall, pleased with the quiet order I had made. Moments later, Paige walked in, glanced around, and sighed. Not a word of thanks, just a sigh, like I had somehow failed to meet a standard she hadn't spoken aloud. "Next time, Mom, try to get under the sofa too," she said, her eyes already back on her phone. The words weren't harsh, but they landed heavy. Instruction, not appreciation, Correction, not kindness. I smiled thinly and nodded. But inside, something shifted. At dinner, the pattern repeated. I would rise to refill the water pitcher, to fetch extra napkins, to clear plates before anyone asked. It became habit, automatic. Paige never said, "Sit, Mom, you've done enough." Tyler never offered to help. Instead, it was expected, unspoken, but absolute. I had become the silent hand that kept things moving. And then there was the chair. Always the same one, nearest the kitchen door. At first, I thought it was coincidence. But week after week, that spot became mine, as if etched into stone. The placement said everything. Close enough to serve, far enough not to belong. The hardest moments were the subtle ones, the way Paige's tone grew sharper when speaking to me than to Tyler. The way she reminded me to take my pills, as though I were careless. The way she once said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll handle the bills. You just focus on keeping the house in order." I wanted to ask, whose house? Yours? Mine? Ours? But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I swallowed them, like I swallowed everything else. Still, there were flashes when the truth shone too brightly to ignore. One Sunday, I offered to bake a pie, an old family recipe, flaky crust, cinnamon apples that used to make the whole house smell like autumn. I was halfway through slicing apples when Paige appeared. "Are you sure you want to do that, Mom?" she asked, her brows pinched. "The kitchen's a mess when you cook. I'll just order dessert instead." Her voice wasn't cruel, but the dismissal cut deeper than she knew. That pie had once been a symbol of love, of home. Now it was an inconvenience. I set down the knife quietly and stepped aside. That night, a store-bought cake sat in the center of the table, glossy and untouched. No one noticed my silence. Lying in bed later, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning in slow circles. The thought came unbidden, sharp as glass. I am no longer a mother here. I am staff. The realization frightened me. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was. And once you name something, you can never unsee it. The tension didn't arrive all at once. It crept in like a draft, through a cracked window. Subtle, chilling, impossible to ignore once you felt it. By then, my days followed a rhythm that was not my own. Wake early, make coffee, tidy the kitchen, fold laundry. Sometimes, I wondered if Paige even noticed the work I did, or if she simply assumed the house kept itself running. Tyler, for his part, rarely acknowledged me at all. He would step over the freshly mopped floor with muddy shoes, or set his empty plate on the counter without a glance in my direction. It wasn't cruelty. It was worse. It was indifference. The house began to feel smaller. Every sound seemed amplified. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the refrigerator, the muted arguments Paige and Tyler thought I couldn't hear through their closed bedroom door. And always, underneath it all, the quiet pressure for me to do more. Say less. Stay useful. One evening stands out in particular. Dinner had been rushed, a takeout meal Paige ordered because, she said, she didn't trust me not to overcook the chicken. I sat in my usual chair by the kitchen door, picking at noodles that tasted of nothing. Halfway through, Paige looked at me and asked, "Mom, did you put the laundry away?" I paused, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. I had. Hours earlier. "Yes," I answered. She frowned, as if my word alone wasn't enough. Because Tyler said he couldn't find his blue shirt. It wasn't the question that stung, it was the suspicion woven into it, as if I were a forgetful child, not a woman who had once raised her single-handedly. After dinner, I found Tyler's shirt folded neatly at the back of his drawer. He hadn't looked. Or maybe he hadn't cared. That night, Lying in bed, I felt a heaviness settle on my chest. Not anger, not yet, but the weight of invisibility. The weight of knowing that, no matter what I did, it would never be enough. Still, I tried to push those thoughts aside. I told myself, families argued, that misunderstandings happened, but the unease only grew. At church one Sunday, Mrs. Langley asked me how I was settling in. Her eyes were warm, her hand soft on mine. I opened my mouth to answer, and found that I couldn't. The words wouldn't come. To admit my unhappiness felt like betrayal, yet to lie felt like erasing myself. So I smiled, small and tight, and said, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. Back home, I noticed how Paige sighed when I left a teacup in the sink, how Tyler rolled his eyes when I asked if he wanted seconds, how the air in the living room thickened whenever I entered, as if my presence disrupted the balance. None of it was explosive. No screaming matches, no slammed doors, just the slow erosion of dignity, grain by grain, until I could barely remember what it felt like to be seen, to be valued. And somewhere inside me, a thought began to grow, fragile but persistent. Is this all that's left of my life? It was not yet rebellion, not yet escape, but it was the beginning, the first crack in the wall they had built around me. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, when the weight of the house felt particularly heavy. Paige had left a list on the counter: wipe down the bathroom mirror, vacuum the guest room, pick up milk if I went out. Each task written in her neat, clipped handwriting, as though I were a hired hand. I stared at the paper for a long time, my fingers trembling slightly, and thought, this isn't living. This is surviving. After finishing what she asked, I sat down with a cup of lukewarm tea and opened the local paper. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a distraction, some reminder that the world outside these four walls still existed. That was when I saw it. A small advertisement tucked between columns about garden sales and church events. Horizon Gardens, a community where seniors thrive with dignity, independence, and care. The words caught me off guard. Dignity, independence. They shone on the page like beacons. My heart gave a small, unexpected leap. I traced the phone number printed beneath the ad with the tip of my finger, whispering it to myself like a prayer. Memories rose unbidden. I thought of my late husband, Charles, how he used to tell me, "You deserve more than just getting by." I could almost hear his voice in that moment, urging me not to accept the scraps of life but to demand the feast. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Was I really considering this? Leaving Paige and Tyler, the only family I had left nearby? What would people say? Would they think I was ungrateful? Selfish? But the longer I sat, the more I realized it wasn't selfishness I was craving. It was air, freedom, a chance to wake up and know the day belonged to me. That night, I dreamed of a place where mornings began with birdsong, where laughter drifted from open windows, where I could sit on a porch and sip coffee without anyone telling me I was sitting too long, or that I'd catch a chill. Horizon Gardens became more than an ad. It became an idea, a lifeline. In the days that followed, I found myself secretly searching online when Paige was out. Pictures of Horizon Gardens filled the screen. Sunlit rooms, tidy gardens, smiling faces. There was a library, a community center, even watercolor classes. It wasn't a nursing home. It was a place for living, a place where people my age weren't burdens, but whole human beings, with stories still unfolding. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. For so long, I had been shrinking, making myself small to fit inside Paige's world. Could I really step into my own again? One afternoon, while folding towels, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the hallway table. My face looked tired, lined with years I hadn't realized had passed. But in my eyes, for the first time in months, there was a spark. That spark was hope. I didn't tell Paige. I didn't tell Tyler. But inside, something had shifted. The seed planted, that Tuesday, had begun to grow roots. And though I didn't yet know how, I felt a quiet certainty. My story wasn't finished. Horizon Gardens wasn't just a dream. It was a door. And I was finally ready to find the key. Once the idea of Horizon Gardens took root, it was all I could think about. Every quiet moment became an opportunity to plan, even if only in whispers inside my head. While Paige barked instructions, or Tyler complained about work, I nodded along, but my mind wandered to images of sunlit courtyards and shelves of books waiting to be read. I began to gather information in secret. A pamphlet arrived in the mail one morning. Bright pictures of smiling residents, pages describing the amenities. I slipped it quickly under my cardigan before Paige came into the kitchen. Later, alone in my room, I smoothed the creases from its glossy cover and read every word by the glow of my bedside lamp. Independence, community, respect. The words felt like oxygen. Of course, I couldn't just leave without preparing. I had to be careful. Paige had a way of noticing things, of asking sharp questions if she saw me lingering too long at the computer. So I began small. I sorted through my things quietly, piece by piece. A faded quilt my grandmother had stitched, a locket with Charles's photo, the diary I had kept since my 20s. These weren't just belongings. They were fragments of myself, reminders that I was more than the shadow Paige wanted me to be. Each item went into a small suitcase I kept tucked at the back of the closet, hidden beneath spare blankets. Money was another matter. Paige insisted on helping with my finances, which really meant monitoring them. But I had kept a small account separate, just for emergencies. Over the years, I'd added bits here and there. Birthday gifts, pension leftovers. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. Enough, maybe, for a down payment at Horizon Gardens. Every night I rehearsed the steps in my mind. What to pack, who to call, how to arrange transportation without Paige noticing. I felt like a thief planning a heist. Except the treasure I wanted wasn't gold. It was freedom. And yet fear shadowed me. What if Paige found out? What if she confronted me, accused me of betrayal? I could already hear her voice. After all we've done for you, Mom. After letting you stay here. But then, late one evening, as I folded laundry in the hushed quiet of the house, another thought surfaced. After all I've done for her, raising her alone after her father died, working double shifts, skipping meals, sacrificing sleep, so she could have what she needed. If anything, she owed me, not the other way around. That realization steadied me. One afternoon, while Paige and Tyler were out shopping, I allowed myself a test run. I packed the small suitcase with essentials: quilt, locket, diary, a few clothes. I lifted it, testing the weight. My heart pounded as if I were already on the run. Then I placed it back carefully, covering it again with the blankets. The suitcase was my secret, my promise to myself. From that day on, I carried a quiet strength with me. Even when Paige criticized how I folded the towels, or Tyler grumbled about his dinner, I no longer felt entirely trapped, because I knew something they didn't. My escape plan was already in motion. The cage door was still closed, but the key was in my hand. It came on a night when the house was heavy with silence, but my heart was already raw from weeks of biting my tongue. Paige had returned from work tense, her voice clipped and sharp, while Tyler sprawled on the couch, scrolling his phone, oblivious to everything but himself. I had spent the afternoon cleaning, even baking a pie the kind Paige used to beg for as a child. I thought maybe this small gesture would soften her, remind her of the bond we once shared. But when she walked through the door and saw it on the counter, her face darkened. "Pie?" she said flatly, setting down her bag with a thud. "Mom, did you really waste time on this? The bathroom still smells musty, and Tyler's shirt isn't pressed. You know he has that meeting tomorrow." I froze, dish towel in my hand. I did the bathroom this morning," I said quietly. "And Tyler's shirt is already ironed. It's hanging in the closet." Tyler looked up, frowning as if inconvenienced by the mention of his name. "Well, I didn't see it," he muttered, turning back to his screen. The unfairness hit me like a wave. All day spent tending to this house, and still my efforts were dismissed, twisted into failure. Something inside me cracked. "I am not your maid," I said, louder than I intended. The words startled even me. Paige's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" I said. I repeated, my voice trembling but firm. "I am not your maid. I am your mother. And I deserve better than this constant criticism." For a moment, the room was still. Then Paige laughed short, disbelieving. "Better? Mom, you're lucky we let you stay here. Do you think anyone else would put up with this? The bills, the food, the roof over your head. Tyler and I provide that. You should be grateful." Her words struck like daggers, but instead of shrinking, I stood taller. "Grateful?" I whispered. "Paige, I raised you. Alone. I worked until my hands bled so you could have a future. And now you stand there and tell me I should be grateful for being treated like a burden?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about not wanting to get involved, but the damage was already done. My hands shook, but not from fear, from release. Decades of silence, of swallowing my own needs, spilled out in that moment. "I am done," I said. "Done with the lists, done with the criticism, done pretending that this is a life worth living." Paige's face flushed red. "What do you mean, done?" I didn't answer. Not directly. Instead, I reached for the pie, sliced a neat portion, and placed it on a plate. Then, ignoring her stunned expression, I carried it next door to Mrs. Langley, who had often waved kindly from her porch. When I returned, the pie was gone from the counter, and so was the weight pressing on my chest. That night, lying awake in my bed, I replayed the moment over and over. The shock on Paige's face, the defiance in my voice. For the first time in years, I hadn't been silent. And though there would be consequences, I knew something with absolute certainty. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. The quiet woman they had taken for granted no longer existed. The argument with Paige didn't fade, as arguments usually did. It lingered in the air, thick and sour, wrapping itself around every silence that followed. For days afterward, she barely spoke to me except in clipped commands, her disappointment simmering just below the surface. Tyler avoided eye contact altogether, grumbling when I passed him in the hallway. But instead of feeling ashamed, I felt strangely lighter. That night, when I stood up for myself, had cracked something open, and now the light was seeping through. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't go back to silence. The suitcase in my closet seemed to call to me. Every evening when the house quieted, I would open the door and stare at it, half hidden under the blankets. It was my secret heartbeat, my proof that there was still life waiting for me beyond these walls. One morning, after a particularly harsh exchange with Paige about all the water I supposedly wasted in my bath, I sat at the kitchen table with trembling hands and made the call. "Horizon Gardens. This is Anna speaking. How can I help you?" Her voice was warm, professional, but it carried something else too: kindness. I gripped the receiver tighter. Yes. Hello. I began, my throat dry. My name is Margaret. I saw your ad in the paper and, well, I was wondering if you had any openings. There was a pause, the soft click of a keyboard, and then, we do actually. Would you like to schedule a tour? A tour. The words felt like a lifeline thrown across dark water. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I would. We arranged it for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I wrote the details carefully on the back of an old grocery receipt and slipped it into my pocket. All day, I moved through the house with a quiet smile that I tried to hide. Paige noticed, narrowing her eyes, but said nothing. When Tuesday came, I woke early, heart hammering. Paige had already left for work, and Tyler was still asleep. I dressed simply: my navy cardigan, pressed slacks, the pearl earrings Charles had given me on our 10th anniversary. I wanted to feel like myself again, not the weary shadow they saw. I told Tyler I was meeting a friend for coffee. He grunted without looking up from his phone. Then I walked out the door with my small handbag, the sun warming my face. The drive to Horizon Gardens felt unreal, as if I were moving through a dream. And when I arrived, it was even more beautiful than the pictures. Neatly kept gardens lined the paths. Laughter floated from an open window, and the air smelled faintly of lavender. Anna met me at the entrance. She was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She showed me the dining hall, sunlight streaming across polished tables, where residents chatted like old friends. The library smelled of old paper and possibility. In the activity room, a watercolor class was in progress, brushes sweeping across canvases as soft music played. This isn't a nursing home, Anna explained. It's a community, a place where people can live fully, not just get by. Her words echoed what I had been yearning for. By the time she showed me a small apartment, cozy, with a window overlooking a garden, I felt tears prick my eyes. I want this, I said, surprising even myself. My voice trembled, but my resolve did not. How do I make it happen? Anna smiled gently. We can start the paperwork today. Take your time, though. It's a big step. But I didn't need more time. For years, I had given away my life in tiny pieces, until there was almost nothing left. And here was the chance to reclaim it all at once. That afternoon, I signed the initial forms. It wasn't final yet. I still had to move in, still had to tell Paige, but the decision had been made. On the drive home, my heart pounded not with fear, but with anticipation. I glanced at the houses passing by, the lives unfolding in each one, and thought, this is the beginning, not the end. When I walked back into Paige's house, she was there, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Where were you? She demanded. I took a deep breath, setting down my bag. The old me would have flinched, offered excuses. But now, I met her gaze steadily. Out, I said simply. And soon, Paige, I'll be out for good. Her mouth opened, ready to unleash a storm, but I didn't wait to hear it. I walked past her, into my room, and closed the door. The suitcase under the blankets no longer felt like a secret. It felt like a promise. And soon, it would be fulfilled. The days that followed felt like moving through a storm. But this time I was no longer afraid of the thunder. Paige grew more suspicious, demanding answers, picking apart every move I made. Tyler avoided the tension, but his silence only deepened the divide. The house, once a place I desperately tried to keep peaceful, had become little more than walls closing in. I packed at night, when they were asleep. Bit by bit, the quilt, The locket, the diary, the clothes. Each item folded into the suitcase felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. There was fear, of course, fear of Paige's fury when she discovered the truth, but it was outweighed by something stronger: hope. When the morning of my move finally arrived, I stood in my small room one last time, sunlight slanting across the floor. For years, I had shrunk myself to fit into this space, into their rules, into their judgments. But now, with the suitcase by my side, I was ready to step beyond it. Paige caught me in the hallway, eyes blazing. "What do you think you're doing?" I looked at her, the daughter I had raised, the woman who had forgotten the weight of a mother's sacrifice, and I didn't tremble. "I'm leaving, Paige. I'm choosing a life where I'm not just surviving, but living." She sputtered, angry, incredulous. "You can't just walk out. After everything, after we've taken care of you." I shook my head. "Number after I've taken care of you. For years. And now, it's my turn." There was nothing more to say. I walked past her, suitcase rolling quietly across the floor. My steps were steady, my heart pounding not with dread but with freedom. When I arrived at Horizon Gardens, Anna greeted me with a smile, holding the door open wide, as if ushering me into a new chapter. The scent of lavender drifted in the air, and voices of laughter floated down the hallway. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I belonged. That evening, as I sat by the window of my new room, watching the garden sway gently in the breeze, I opened my diary and wrote, "Today, I chose myself." I thought of Paige and Tyler, of the house I had left behind, of all the years I had spent bending, until I nearly broke. And then I thought of tomorrow, of watercolor classes, of neighbors who smiled without judgment, of mornings where my worth wouldn't be measured in folded towels or ironed shirts. Freedom didn't come in a dramatic blaze. It came quietly, with a suitcase, a signature, and a single, unshakable truth. I was still here, and I mattered.